It started as a comment, then it became a joke in the next video, then a ranty tweet on Twitter, and this is the end result. When I built Death Toll on Thor in a recent video, some people were kinda upset with that, and I was kinda upset with them being upset because I felt like they were misinformed. But in the end, it's more of a thing of the information is just not out there, so how is anyone gonna inform themselves? So when I tweeted about it, a lot of people said, then just explain it to us, and that's exactly what I'm intending to do in this video. We're gonna talk about Bluestone versus Death Toll, and why you may be able to build Death Toll on more characters than you expect. A few quick disclaimers ahead. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't build Bluestone on these characters or anything else for that matter. But there are reasons to build Death Toll on certain characters. We usually expect them to build Bluestone because that's what you traditionally do, and that's what we're gonna go into. It's also important to note that this mostly focuses on the jungle, as in solo the choice is often more defined by the guard you're playing, as lane pressure is way more important when you have to solo clear a wave constantly, and you don't really have the same flexibility as a jungler who partially clears waves and partially is in the jungle, where a lot more factors come into play. So for example, on a tour, you're most likely always better off with Bluestone, or at least not with Death Toll. There are outliers here as well. Think for example Amaterasu, who could theoretically benefit from both. Typically, due to what the meta dictates, you will have a preferred choice here as well though. And note that more often than not, this choice ends up being Death Toll. Let's first talk about Death Toll's and Bluestone's pros and cons, and then move on to what the idea behind building Death Toll is, as well as mirror matchups and the guards that should make use of it or shouldn't make use of it. A quick refresher of both item stats. Death Toll costs 800 gold, so does Bluestone. It has 10 physical power, 100 health, and hitting an enemy with a basic attack restores 8 health and 4 mana. Basic attacks that hit all enemies in melee range restore 4 health and 2 mana on every enemy after the first. That means cleave attacks basically. Bluestone Pendant, on the other hand, has 15 physical power, so 5 more, has 50 flat mana, 5 MP5, and enemies hit by your damaging abilities take an additional 30 physical damage over 2 seconds with a maximum of 2 stacks. The pros of Death Toll in a jungle build, especially on characters that usually don't benefit as much from it, are as follows. Death Toll has health, and health synergizes way better with every tank item you build afterwards. Especially as an assassin, you'll often build items like Encile or maybe something more bruiserish like Shift's Shield, but generally a lot of the protection items you build don't have health on them. If you're familiar with effective health, you will know that building more health will also benefit you if you already have more protections, and the other way around. If you take less damage and you have more health, then it results in having effective health that is even higher. And as such, having a health item up front can be very strong. Also, in level 1, most characters don't have a lot of health, so it's especially beneficial to have this extra health spike here. 100 is quite a lot on that level. Now, Death Toll is not only good when you're going into a tankier or bruisery build after, but that's when it usually has the most benefit for you. Furthermore, your early trading potential will always be higher with Death Toll as compared to Bluestone, as it outsustains it in a trade. You will have 100 base health, which already is a lot in a trade, and you get another 8 health per basic attack. In most trades, you will land at least some basic attacks, because otherwise they're really just poke battles, and in those situations you will have, well, let's say at least 130 health, assuming that you hit for basics, which is not very unlikely when you're boxing someone. On the other hand, we have Bluestone, which deals a maximum of around 90 damage in most situations. Obviously, you could theoretically deal up to 120 damage, but realistically, you can't space out your abilities in a way where you have exactly that gap to get all the 4 ticks going. Mostly you will use your abilities faster, and 90 damage is already pretty optimistic here, as it requires you to have at least 3 damaging abilities that you can use in that fight, which, excluding your ultimate, is already not even the case for every assassin at least. In many realistic scenarios, you'll actually end up with even less damage. You will actually end up with more around 70-ish damage, because the third hit will only restack the other passives. But let's say we have 90 damage here, and then you have 5 extra power. 5 extra power in early is pretty irrelevant. Assuming we have abilities that hit for a total of 200% scaling, this would still only be 10 extra damage. So even then, we'd only reach 100 damage under ideal conditions, meaning we would deal exactly as much damage as Death Toll already has in extra health. And then there's still the fact that you will heal up more with the Death Toll basics. So in a trade, Death Toll will come out on top 99% of the time. On the other hand, Bluestone will win a ranged poked battle 100% of the time, as long as the same amount of abilities are hit and the same scaling is assumed. But then again, somebody with Death Toll can easily heal that up in the wave as well. And while we're already on the topic of trading, you can stick around longer in boxing fights against frontliners as well, as you can heal up when they're very tanky and you're not as reliant on burst. This used to be pretty irrelevant for an assassin because you would typically just go for the backline, but in recent times you can't really just go for the backline anymore when a lot of characters in general are building more tanky, so you will find yourself in more extended trades. Focus on burst the squishy is simply not as easy when the enemy mage has a Height of the Urchin on him and will as such take less damage to begin with, and in those situations you can actually benefit from having Death Toll. Furthermore, your jungle sustain at any point of the game is higher. You have to back less, which can be very beneficial, as it opens more opportunities for you to gank a lane that otherwise wouldn't have been there because you would have been too low. The sustain in jungle is already good with Bombers, but it is significantly increased with Death Toll, especially because you spend a lot of time around waves as well, where you're not healing up by yourself. And as a last perk, you're less dependent on Bombers mid to late game when trading out for better items, as you have the sustains through Death Toll. That means if you're just a little bit short on an item and you just want to sell Bombers, you can do that because you will still have Stealth Heal, which you will still need most likely. With Bluestone, you'd have to sell a significant chunk of your damage by selling Bluestone, or you'd have to just wait out, or you'd have to sell your sustain. With Death Toll, you keep a bit of both. Now the cons side here is significantly shorter, but that doesn't mean that the cons of Death Toll aren't significant. It's just that they're more crucial, but they're less. Number 1, there is less kill potential. You'll probably have at least 1 kill per match that will get away because they survive as you don't have the extra damage from Bluestone, and that, you know, can take away from the snowball potential especially. Now we're not really in a snowballing meta, so it's up to you how much weight you give to that. The other downside is slower clear in both lane and jungle, meaning slow rotations, not necessarily only for you, but potentially also for your mid lane or your soul laner, for example, if you're helping them clear. As such, you can lose more camps, you can fall behind that way, or the enemy can just get a lead earlier. That can be your downfall if you're not catching up in other ways, and especially abuse the fact that they have to back more. If we're talking about Bluestone pros, those are basically the same as Death Toll's cons. You have higher kill potential, especially early in the game, and you have higher clear. And this higher clear can be especially important on guards with relatively low clear, as you will be able to compensate for their low clear with it. This eases the early game for those who are relatively weak with the early clear and kind of try to exist in this meta in the first place, as it allows them to at least get some pressure going. Again, the cons of Bluestone here are more. That doesn't mean that they're in any way worse, it's just that it's a higher number, which are maybe not as crucial in comparison. The first one, for example, is that mana and MP5 is not as relevant in the moment, especially with Bumba's Mask. You'll get 30 mana in 30 seconds, versus approximately 20 mana from Death Toll per wave if you hit 5 basics. That's assuming you're not going for camps in between. So which item actually gives you more mana depends highly on your playstyle and how much you rotate out. I would say at the moment it feels to me personally like Death Toll gives you a little more, but again, in neither case it's very relevant because usually Bombers alone is enough to restore your mana almost all of the time, and neither item is really that important, which also makes the flat mana a bit redundant. Flat damage scales poorly into late game, and Bluestone has flat damage. So this effect will be less impactful the longer the game goes, and the 5 power don't really compensate for that, as the enemies will have more protection and therefore it deals less damage, as it's not true damage, it's just physical damage. As the current meta is very late game oriented, that's maybe not ideal for Bluestone. Last but not least, Bluestone is also hard countered by Mark of the Vanguard. That at the moment is really not that relevant because I don't see anyone building Mark of the Vanguard. Okay, so what is the idea of Death Toll? You want to survive more, you want to be able to stay around the camps more and around the jungle in general more when the enemy has to back, and you want to be more effective in a meta that revolves around being focused on late game and getting there as best as possible and then having fights. It's a very passive meta, and Death Toll just has a better spot in there than it used to have beforehand. Now for the situations where I would choose it. I really like the item in mirror matchups because often you will find yourself trading that mirror, so this is only exclusively for casuals, but if I'm for example against another Thor, then I know that I can usually get the upper hand by having Death Toll. Other than that, it's game dependent and highly depends on if I intend to go any tanky items at all, or if I want to go more full damage assassin, and how I think the game will develop in general, how much pressure I will need compared to how much I will be boxing. I will recommend some gods where I would typically stick to Bluestone and some gods that are more flexible, aside of those that obviously always build Death Toll if they build any starters at all, like for example Bakasura, where you either go Death Toll or just boots. But I will also say that this is very flexible. For example, Adapting has been building Bluestone on Arachne. So there are these outliers where you can just use items that are not expected on the character and you can still utilize them effectively. It's not set in stone, these are just some recommendations based on what I've experienced, and that's the god picks I would recommend or not recommend. First of all, those where I'd stick to Bluestone. Bastet, as she really doesn't utilize basic attacks enough to make any use of it. Daji, as she also has a very in-out playstyle and you want to maximize the damage from her abilities. She also has an easy way to apply it with her 2. She also has this nasty way of having a lot of dots already, so you have a lot of unexpected damage by going Bluestone as well. So generally, there's just not many basics she throws in between that would get enough out of Death Toll for it to be worth it. Yes, she does use basics, but for example during her 2 she can't even use basic attacks at all. Hunbatz. Hunbatz is just one of those gods that doesn't have the craziest ability damage, and it really helps him, especially a big AoE where you hit multiple targets with Bluestone can be very strong. But also different from other gods, he is able to bounce the monkey through a group of enemies, which can proc Bluestone on all of them, and he has 3 damaging abilities outside of his ultimate, making it easier to get more procs off. Then there's Najda, where I would generally go for Bluestone because of the ring toss, where you can do the same thing as with the Hunbatz monkey. You can just hit multiple targets and deal a lot of damage to them that way. But at the same time, I will note that DJ Pernicus has considered at least building Death Toll as well, because he has those AoE basics and he would get ridiculous sustaining in the laning phase with his build and heal on top of that as well. I personally prefer Bluestone, but it's been considered. Serket, always Bluestone, no reason not to, as she really doesn't benefit from basic attack cancelling. It ruins her passive, so you don't really make use of Death Toll in normal fights at all. Susanoo, because he has so many opportunities to proc Bluestone very safely from a far distance as well, and I don't think there's any perks to having Death Toll over that, because you do attack cancel, but it's not nearly as much as your Bluestone damage is worth. Kali, I would prefer Bluestone most of the time, unless I'm going straight into boots. You could go Death Toll as well, but I like the extra pressure from the 2. And Loki, well, I guess if you're playing Loki jungle, you make more use of Bluestone than Death Toll at least. The more flex options are especially those that have only 2 abilities to deal damage with outside of their ultimate, or those who have AoE cleave basics. The first one here is Camazotz. Camazotz already has ridiculous sustain, but his sustain goes through the roof if you throw in a Death Toll. He will basically only ever have to back when he gets a full item, because he can heal up from his pools, from his 2, and from his Death Toll with the cleaves on the camps, which just allows for very, very aggressive plays. At the same time, Bluestone is just equally good on him. Fenrir, because he often goes into more tankier playstyles, tankier builds, also only 2 abilities to deal damage with outside of the ultimate. At the same time, Fenrir is also a great option for Bluestone for very high early aggression and high kill potential, so one of those where it's once again very much up to your choosing, but I would lean a bit more towards Bluestone. Nemesis, long time used to be a Bluestone only god, as her clear was so bad and that was the only way to get it going somehow, but now that her clear is actually better and the damage has been increased, she can make use of Death Toll, as she uses a lot of basic attacks in between still, and therefore can use Death Toll much more effectively than others. Ratatoskr, once again, AoE cleave. He does have 3 abilities, but the AoE cleave makes it so nice, gives him so much extra heal, and gives him a very high amount of sustain in combination with his Acorn, which also heals him. Thanatos, again, ridiculous sustain already, and if you throw in more, you can play super aggressive and you will most likely get out of most situations. Also benefits from having a little more health in general. And the AoE cleave on jungle camps just heals them up to full, basically. And last but not least, Thor, also only 2 damaging abilities, uses a lot of basic attacks in between. His combo is a lot of cancels, basically between every single attack. You also have a chance to throw in more basics through the wall stun if your one is down, for example. And as such, I think he's also a character where it can be utilized, especially since you're often going into bruiser builds. There are 2 more guys that I could theoretically mention. A Willish, as her early game aggression isn't that good anymore, it used to be much better, so maybe now you can go Death Toll, but then again, I think it's still good enough to go Bluestone, and I would prefer it mostly. And Mercury, if you're not going for tier 2 boots, which I personally prefer in most situations anyways. That is hopefully a comprehensive overview of when and how you can build Death Toll on gods that would usually benefit from Bluestone more, and where you should probably avoid it. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed this and you're not subscribed yet, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell, it really helps me out. And it gives you the chance to win some codes. I should note that you still have the chance to win codes if you're not clicking the bell, but the point is that you're most likely gonna miss out on the video because you don't get a notification without the bell. Thank you very much, commenter from the last video, you put that really nicely. See you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.